bill request. We haven't read that bill per se, so. I don't know, you may not be ready to do that today, but it would be helpful at some point to come back.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
So this is Michael Grady with Legislative Council. I assume you all know the context for H 238, the enactment of the Act 131 last year. The proposed report by A&R to create a regulatory program that the agency, based on a statutory or TSCA definition of PFAS, but the House wanted the broader definition of PFAS that you have traditionally used. That led to a change in the bill. Instead of creating a regulatory program at A&R, you are maintaining the structure and statute that you had in Title IX, enacted under Act 131, Consumer Protection Authority, implemented by the Attorney General, and you are adding 3 new products to the list of products that are prohibited if they contain PFAS. One of the other major changes is you're doing a structural change to that chapter, because you literally ran out of statutory sections in the chapter to use. And without doing the restructuring that's in H 238, you would have had to have restructured other subchapters in Title IX, Chapter 63. So this is, it looks like it's a lot, and there is some strange restructuring, but it was necessary to give you statutory space. With that all said, you're on page 1, section.
Do you want to put it up on screen just in case? Yeah, that'd be helpful.
We're interested in this bill, so yeah, well, it's important.
So H 238 first section is amending that subchapter in the Consumer Protection chapter in Title IX. Subchapter relates to PFAS and consumer products. The first section relates to definitions. These are not changing on the first page. In the second page, there is a new product added, and the definition for that product. Cleaning product is a compound intended for routine cleaning, including general purpose cleaners, bathroom cleaners, glass cleaners, carpet cleaners, floor care products, and hand soaps. It does not mean an antimicrobial pesticide. Definition of cookware is the same.
Did we ever ban antimicrobial pesticides, heavy or trichlor or any of those things? No,
You have not
we haven't touched that.
banned antimicrobials.
Okay. It's a whole different-
To my knowledge.
Okay,
Definition of cookware is the same. The definition of dental floss is based on a code of federal regulations definition, a string-like device made of cotton or other fibers intended to remove plaque and food particles from between the teeth to reduce tooth decay. fibers of the wax may be coated with wax, easier to use. And that's from 21 CFR 872.1639.
317 or
21 CFR 872 period 6390.
thank you.
Then there's the definition of fluorine treated container, and to clarify, dental floss and fluorine treated containers are two new products that are being added to the chapter and the prohibition. And fluorine treated containers are fluorinated treated plastic containers. Moving on, the definition of a continency protection product remains the same. You come to the definition of intentionally added. This is something you've heard testimony on. The House Committee wanted to address when PFAS might be present in the final product during the manufacturing process. They also wanted to address when PFAS is present in the product due to the use of water. So what they have proposed is intentionally added means the addition of a chemical in the product that serves an intended function in the manufacturing of a product or in the final product and results in PFAS in the final product. The addition of PFAS must be known or reasonably ascertainable by the manufacturer. PFAS shall not be considered intentionally added if the chemicals present in the product due to use of water containing PFAS and the manufacturer took no action that resulted in the PFAS being present in water. Now, you received a proposal from the Attorney General with some support from ANR, I believe, about changing this language,
Yes, was that the,
specifically about the water.
Yeah.
And basing that on whether or not the water is from a permitted water supply in Vermont, or if it meets the maximum contaminant levels for water in the state.
so, so how would that read? And then how would that, if we put the Vermont drinking water standard in effect, can we do that and have it be a certificate of compliance for manufacturers out of state?
So it would read, the first sentence would be the same, and the second sentence would be the same, and then it would say PFAS shall not be considered intentionally added on the basis of water used in the manufacture of the product. If the water used in the manufacture of the product was from a public water system permitted pursuant to 10 VSA Chapter 56, or a water source that does not violate the maximum contaminant levels for PFAS established in the rules adopted under 10 VSA Chapter 56. Now, the Attorney General, the main enforcement authority underneath this chapter or subchapter, is going to be the use of certificates of compliance, asking manufacturers to comply, certifying their compliance, providing information to ascertain their compliance. So that would be how they would determine if the water or PFAS is present in the product due to water from a water system or in MCLs.
Okay. Senator Cummings.
I can see where public water supplies are expensive. I've several times considered sinking a little well in my backyard to water my lawn. I can see where a manufacturer might put in a well specifically for a manufacturing process. If they have to test that and bring it to drinking water standards, it could be expensive, depending on what was in it.
So manufacturers have shifted from public water systems, public water supplies to industrial wells for purposes of manufacturing. That has occurred. and bonds. Sometimes they use both. Um, there would be an expectation that the water used that could contribute to PFAS to a final product is going to have to be the MCL. So there might need to be upgrade on an industrial well.
Okay. I mean, weighing the balance. Public health,
But we don't know.
yeah. Can we look at language? Can we look at that language the next time?
Sure, it may be on your
You have it?
committee's website. I know it came in last week, but on. So. Submitted your submission.
No, it was from the AG's office. It wasn't from Trinity.
I can't remember who had it.
It was from legislature.
Was it the AG who had
I
it?
think it was from Todd.
Yeah.
Uh,
So Kiki can find that.
And I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, he testified. I don't think he sent written. I'm not sure on that. Kiki, can you get his written suggestion for that?
Yeah, it is under Tuesday if that.
It's under Tuesday?
But
Okay,
And I can post it for today.
yeah, that would be good. Let's do that and we can look at it together. And thinking that, you know, his language might be slightly different from your wording on this.
Well, I was reading his,
Okay, you were reading,
Yeah.
okay. All right,
so you will see that PFAS shall not be considered intentionally added on the basis of water used in the manufacture of the product. Water used in the manufacture of the product is from the public water system permitted pursuant to 10 VSA Chapter 56 for water source that does not violate the maximum 10 of those PFAS established in the adopted under 10 VSA Chapter 56. But they won't have to bring a system up entirely to a full drinking water system standard. They would just need to basically monitor and then treat if the PFAS exceeded the MCLs.
okay.
You have a question?
Go ahead.
Hey, we don't know if there's any one out there violating this. I mean, we don't know. No, if we've got water going in. It says intention. That means one opens a bottle of PFAS and pours it in the waters, it's going by. It's like chlorine, fluoride.
Or you know that
Yeah,
there's a
it-
well or an underground source that's got,
Right, if you were in Bennington, you might be a little undone. The other thing I don't know is how complicated is it to test? And B, how complicated, i.e. expensive, is it to remove? It's my understanding, we're having trouble removing PFAS from public water supplies. And that to me would be where I'd want to put my focus. I mean, it just seems, I don't know what the water's doing, where the PFAS are getting added.
Okay.
Is this an internal device that's
right,
no one's going to touch?
I'd like to, if I could, please, thank you, Madam Chair, sort of add to what Senator Cummings is asking by just asking that we're talking here about when it's not intentionally added, which are all these examples. Can you share some examples where PFAS is intentionally added to I mean, is that like, are we talking like text?
Intentionally added to water or intentionally added to the
Well,
crop?
this particular, so line 4 of AB
Right.
38.
So the House Committee didn't want water as the source of PFAS. So PFAS is somehow the source. If water was somehow the source of PFAS, the House Committee didn't want that to be considered intentionally added. But they did recognize that maybe a manufacturer would add PFAS to water or take some other action that would result in PFAS being in the water. And in those situations, that manufacturer was still considered to be potentially adding the PFAS.
And how is that determined? 'Cause, I mean, because there are, as I said last week, there are seltzers that have fairly, like, that have PFAS in them. How do you?
Well, I think the Attorney General's main enforcement tool is going to be certificates of compliance. Which may be why that the AG and ANR is asking for this change, because this is a definable, testable standard. Where whether or not they intentionally added it would be effectively on attestation of the
And the
manufacturer.
company will have to respond to the request and draft a document that they'll send to the AG's office.
Yes.
All right.
And we heard that the carbon filtration, Matt, did you wanna, or
I'm still trying to get my head around it. Are we talking every manufacturer in the world?
Huh?
Or just Vermont manufacturers?
It's anyone that's selling these products
It's Vermont.
in Vermont.
they don't have to sell them.
But also if we're using
I'm already losing all my fruits, vegetables,
I know.
and anything grown outside of the borders.
But also if we're using water that's sourced up from Vermont and we know it has PFAS in it, does
But
that mean we're intentionally?
Yes, because when you look at the definition of potentially added, it says when it's known or reasonably ascertainable. And there is a definition of known or reasonably ascertainable as all information in the person's possession or control, plus all information that a reasonable person similarly situated might be expected to possess, control, or know. So if you are in Vermont, certain parts of Vermont,
Right.
you should, and you're manufacturing, you should known or reasonably ascertainable that groundwater or water supply has PFAS in it.
Well, I mean, we've got a neighboring town that has uranium or had uranium in its water supply. When that's known, I mean, if I wanted to sneak PFAS in because it made something
Or if it's just,
slippery. And so I purposely put my plant in a town that had a very publicly known problem in their wells. That would be one thing. It's another thing to say everybody that manufactures anything in the state of Vermont or anywhere in the world has to test their water for PFAS. And if there are any above public drinking standards, then they can't sell in Vermont.
No, they just remove it using carbon filtration system.
And how expensive is that?
If they're meeting the MCLs, they don't have to do anything other than that. If it's more than that, if it's more than the MCL, maybe they will have to go to treatment or they find another source of water.
Or what if there isn't another source of it?
Then they would have to treat if they wanted to continue, or they wouldn't be able to sell the product.
In Vermont?
And other states that have similar provisions.
How many other states?
Matt, do you want to comment on this whole discussion? Because I think it would be helpful.
Sure, for the
For the
record,
record, yeah.
for the record, Matt Chapman, Director of Waste Management and Prevention Division with DEC. Sort of a couple things taking them in order. First of all, the ability to test for PFAS in drinking water is pretty easy at this point. They're not incredibly expensive tests. They're down below $200 the last time I checked in order to do it. And they're fairly straightforward to do. The treatment is out there and available. I mean, the cost of treatment is always going to depend on how much water you're using, and the more water you use, the more expensive the treatment is going to be, and the more often you're going to need to basically change out your treatment system. But I guess I would also say, at least from like a feasibility standpoint, it's pretty feasible to treat drinking water or PFAS at this point. So again, it's not infeasible. I don't know. I'm happy to go anywhere else that the committee has questions. Those are the sort of two front and present. I mean, I guess as far as other jurisdictions that do this, I mean, I think it's worth pointing out. I'm sure this question or issue also came up. Rhode Island is the other state that looks at inputs into the manufacturing process, right? So there's a distinction, I think, between most of the other states at this point have been focused on PFAS being added to a product for its functional or technical effect. And both the agency and the Attorney General's office and the Act 131 working group thought that it was important that in fact get expanded out to include things that were added during the manufacturing process. So that end up in the product. So again, not things that are sort of in a piece of equipment, inside a piece of equipment that never come into contact with the product, but like when you're spraying down a plastic molding with a PFAS containing chemical to basically get the plastic out of the molding, we don't want that to be a source of PFAS being added. So there's not a wide set of other states that have experience with respect to what this would be.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is a point of decision making that we'll have the next time we go through the bill.
Okay.
I want to go through and identify all the points of discussion. This is good.
Well, moving on to page 4, you've already looked at the definition of known or reasonably ascertainable definition form, what is intentionally added. Then that allows you to go to the substance of the bill, which is going to be on page 7 and 2494F. So this is the section that's going to consolidate. So let me back up. In Act 131, each product had its own section. It said this product is banned if it intentionally added PFAS. And then there was a second subsection that said it does not apply to the sale of these products. So instead of each of the products having its own section, you're consolidating the prohibition into 2494F. Manufacturer shall not manufacture, sell, offer for sale, distribute for sale, or distribute for use in the state the following consumer products, which PFAS have been intentionally added in any amount. Aftermarket stain and water resistant treatments, artificial turf, cleaning products, cookware, dental floss, incontinency protection products, juvenile products, for rugs and carpets. In the drafting of this and restructuring the subchapter, I left out the word residential prior to rugs and carpets. That is what Act 131 prohibited last year. PFAS intentionally added to residential rugs and carpets. So I would suggest that as a technical change to the bill.
So what are we adding that's here? What are the new
What
ones?
are the new
Yeah.
in this list?
In that
It's cleaning products and dental floss.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
But by removing the word residential, so you're going from a fairly defined, category to a broader category.
Sure.
So
If you
industrial, commercial, business.
if you go to page 9, what you enacted in Act 131 last year for rugs and carpets, you will see that you intended it to apply just to residential rugs
Right.
or carpets, and my error is I left that out, which was restructuring the subject.
Okay, so that is kind of an addition. Why?
Or it's just it's a,
Oh, you do want us residential back?
yes.
No,
I'm saying that I made an error and
no,
in
I
order
like your error. It's a good error.
I think others in the room might understand.
So you might have a problem. I know. What's good for some is bad for others, right? Wicked, okay.
So those are most of the new products, or most of the listed consumer products that will be prohibited, that intentionally have PFAS. But textiles and textile articles are treated differently because in Act 131, you allowed them to have a certain amount of PFAS in them. Initially, they're allowed to have up to 100 parts per million. And when PFAS are referenced for textiles or textile articles, they're referred to as regulated PFAS. And that's because there's a definition of regulated PFAS. So it's when the PFAS that a manufacturer's potentially added has a functional effect. And you can see the presence in the product or product component at or above 100 parts per million. It starts at 100 parts per million, and then it ratchets down to 50 parts per million. And you'll see that in the subsequent section of the bill. So going back on page 8, lines 5 to 7, manufacturers shall not manufacture, sell, offer for sale, distribute for sale or distribute for use in the state textiles or textile articles with regulated PFAS have been intentionally added in any amount. And then you will see in subsection C, the prohibitions under A and B, all of the consumer products, including those textiles or textile articles, the prohibitions don't apply to basically the sale, distribution, offer, or used products. Those products that have previously used by a consumer for the intended purpose of the product. And then you will see the Act 131 sections being struck as you've consolidated them to one section. Then you come to the new section for fluorine treated containers. This is a section you've heard testimony on as well. Manufacturers shall not sell, offer for sale, distribute for sale, or distribute for use in the state a product listed under subdivision 2494 FA 139. So all of those products you've just looked at, incontinency, juvenile products, dental flossing. You cannot sell, distribute for sale one of those products if it does not contain an intentionally added PFAS, but the container it is sold in contains is a fluorine treated container. So the dental floss is free of PFAS, but the container it is sold in is a fluorine treated container. That product would be prohibited because of the concern of leaching of the PFAS into the product from the container.
I mean, those kinds of containers that we found some? No? Okay.
Does this have PFAS in it? I do not know.
The container,
Maybe the,
that plastic.
but let's get, so this would be sold without liquid in or any other product.
Yeah.
So moving on to sub B, the prohibition under A shall not apply to use, but then you go to sub C. Beginning on January 1, 2030, a manufacturer shall not manufacture, sell, etc. for use in the state of fluorine treated container or any consumer product in the fluorine treated container. So not just the products, any product that's in a fluorine treated, but if this was a fluorine treated container, it would be prohibited as well. That would be 23rd. However, there was concern or testimony in the House that there might be some fluorine treated containers that have to have a fluorinated compound in them. And so the House allowed the Attorney General by rule to allow the sale, offer for sale, distribution, etc. of a consumer product prohibited under this section or of a fluorine treated container upon a determination that use of PFAS in the consumer product or in the container is currently unavoidable. You know, there's a definition of what is a currently unavoidable use. Means that the use of PFAS is essential for health, safety, or the functioning of society, and for which an alternative is not reasonably available. House Committee did discuss the broadness of the currently unavoidable use, especially with regards to the phrase "or the functioning of society." Because they determined that this is based on another state standard, and they believe it's something that the Attorney General would use basically carefully, and there's a time frame for the rollout of this. Wouldn't begin until 2030. So they were comfortable with leaving it as it is. To see how the Attorney General would implement it by rule, knowing that rulemaking is not, very easy, instantaneous process. with
20
Public input.
30 or 28, so I have a comment, I made a lot of comments here because the Attorney General, I think, was indicating they were not happy making rules on this,
Yes,
but
they had asked for a change to this language.
and then was it 27?
So I think the
Second.
2027 date that they are referring to is the effective date for most of the prohibitions.
Oh, okay. Okay, because it does, say- I think it says for cookware 20.
The 2030 date is for fluorine treated
Okay,
containers.
so it is out there already.
I think really the key request that they're making is not to include the currently unavoidable rulemaking authority to allow for a consumer product in a fluorine treated container or a fluorine treated container itself. I think their proposal is based on the concept that fluorine treated containers are going to be phased out nationally, and there is no need for rulemaking. Also, rulemaking is expensive and timely.
But do we know, and I'm asking this generally of you and maybe Matt, of any essentially treated, unavoidably treated, do we know that there are such animals out there? Containers.
So one of the discussions in the House, and I don't know if they ever confirmed it, was gasoline containers.
Yeah,
And whether or not it was an unavoidable use for PFAS being used in that. I don't think they ever confirmed that. But that was the concern that was raised by a couple of members.
well, so but if the rulemaking is between now and 2030, there's time to make that determination.
We're after 2030.
Yeah, and so what role, if any, would ANR have in working with the AG on this? And so I'm looking at Matt for that. I mean, should there be some connection here between you and ANR to offer your expertise?
So I guess I would say a couple things. One is that based on all the work that the Agency of Natural Resources has done, we do not think that there is something that would classify as an unavoidable use under this. So in other words, there are alternatives that exist to fluorinated containers. They may be more expensive. And I guess I will add on top of that, I have heard concern expressed amongst various stakeholders in this process and have been asking since before January for examples of where the problem actually exists and have yet to receive a single example. So it makes me think that there are not that many or any of them out there. I guess lastly, I think the Attorney General's office and I will speak for A&R. A&R doesn't support this provision being in the bill and thinks that subsection D should come out.
How did it get in here?
Because there was discussion in the House committee
Yeah.
about what the ban on fluorine treated containers, scope of it, whether or not there were containers that should be allowed because of their necessity and the need for PFAS as an essentially a component of them. That was the discussion. They decided to provide some flexibility. There was in the Act 131 proposed regulatory program at A&R. There was currently unavoidable language for the future program for the when all consumer products would have a ban PFAS in them. And I think some of the members in the House committee saw that as something that they wanted here as well.
Okay,
But that original proposal by A&R theoretically is thousands of products, and different types of products, and this is more discreet. I couldn't tell you that's gonna put how many products would be banned.
okay. So this is another point that we're gonna have to come back to and decide. What would the bill look like if that? Would it just, this would just be struck, or would it just be? Which section, how would it be?
You have options. You could just strike that and not allow for currently unavoidable rulemaking or currently unavoidable determination. You could have a report back, which is something that potentially could be added. It's kind of hinted at in the Attorney General's input, where they say, she says the committee can assess whether such an exemption is desirable at all, seeking testimony from entities like A&R on this issue. But maybe A&R should do a report on it. And then if the committee determines a compliance mechanism is desired for fluorine treated containers rather than an exemption, Attorney General would suggest extending the compliance date a few years beyond current July 1, 2027 effective date. Again, if it's for consumer products, 2027 makes sense. If it's for containers as a whole or as a category, that would be 2030. So moving the effective dates effectively for that subsection and section.
So we will come back to this. A&R says don't put it in. They've already done a report. So asking for another report on it. It's kind of.
Oh, they have upper.
Huh? It's the Department of Redundancy yet again.
Why don't they just change the date, give us the same time back?
Huh?
They could just change the date and send us back the same time.
Okay, well, you do that.
No, I don't think they could.
I don't
because
think they.
their report that they offered was basically text legislation.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm just trying to be, A&R does not support this
At all.
fluoride at all.
That section.
That section.
That's it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the rest of the bill, they're okay with.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
They've been the guiding light in bringing all this forward. Okay, so that's our decision to make there. It's just, and then the date of implementation, if you take.
Yep, and so
Yeah.
I can move through the next couple of sections
Please,
quickly before you get to some of the sections that make changes to definitions or standards. So the certificate of compliance, you've already talked about how this is the Attorney General's main tool for the subchapter and how she can use it to determine whether PFAS is in a product. The violations section, this is not changing. It declares a violation of the subchapter as a consumer protection violation under 2453. Under that section 2453, the AG has both her own enforcement authority, and then there's a private right of action for those persons who are harmed by a consumer protection violation. Then you come to section 2(9) VSA 2494E19. This is the definition of regulated PFAS for purposes of textiles or textile articles. Remember, you start out with 100 parts per million for this, but then bring it down on page 13, line 7 to 50 parts per million. That's allowing them to phase in the lower standard in textiles or textile articles. And the definition of apparel in section 3, you start out this definition with outdoor apparel for severe weather conditions not being initially included, but then it is added. You will see on page 13, line 19, as one of those clothing items intended for regular wear. And that it will be any of the following. So it is outdoor apparel, outdoor apparel for severe weather conditions. Then you have the A&R report on PFAS regulations in other states, basically looking at those states that are implementing a broad regulatory program based on the broad definition of PFAS. Any needs a class of fluorinated or organic chemicals containing at least one fully fluorinated carbon. They report back how the other states are implementing their regulatory programs, any obstacles, the staffing required, time frame under which each state implemented the program, a recommendation based on review of those other states, whether Vermont should establish the regulatory program for PFAS and consumer products based on the broad definition, and then any other information the state that the secretary determines is necessary for the purpose of informing the general assembly. So that is the whole discussion of should there be a future broad regulatory program at A&R based on the definition of PFAS you have traditionally used, the fluorinated carbon atom. Then you get to two reports. One is from A&R on how to address PFAS in complex storable goods, those goods that are composed of 100 or more manufactured components with an intended useful life of 5 or more years. And then the report on PFAS in food by the Secretary of Agriculture and how to address that. Those two reports are coming in 2033. The House
Why are
Committee,
they coming so far?
the House Committee asked the same question. And the agency said that they are waiting for the development of information on these two subjects, in part from other states. And I think the general response was that if you change the date to any earlier, their report will be, we have to wait until 2033.
So here's my suggestion. Is that your suggestion, 33?
Yes.
Okay, so regardless, it would be great to have an update. An annual update. And I know you could, an update means coming in and saying, nothing has changed, but it is, something may change. You never know.
So just so the committee is aware, so
Okay.
there are two states that are looking at developing comprehensive PFAS management programs, the state of Maine and the state of Minnesota.
Right.
And both of them, their full implementation dates are in 2032.
I know that. I was
So-
gonna suggest we do it in 2032, but might not.
Well, I mean, we would need to build out the staffing and other
Yeah.
things like Maine and Minnesota have, but
It's in the reports, is there any, information about that, about
About
what the
budget?
state would have to do in order to have an outright ban of PFAS in 2032?
So again, I mean, this really gets into what we gave you in Act 131.
Yes.
Which is we basically developed a program that we thought that we could implement.
Now,
We put a trigger on it so that we were moving regionally with other states. So I mean, part of the framework of what we were looking at is saying, well, let's make a program that we think we can implement within our current budgetary framework, which is what Act 131 does. And then say if basically two other states in the region, like Massachusetts and New York, or Massachusetts and Connecticut and Rhode Island, all adopted something that basically is a comprehensive consumer products program with a currently unavoidable use provision associated with it, then the state of Vermont's program would become effective and we would start moving forward.
okay. I might do some thinking about that. What else, Michael, just help us with what's here?
Sure. I've done checkbacks, testimony checkbacks, doesn't have to be a written report. I should just testify on the status of regulations and if it's changed. If you have options.
Now, obviously, there might make, it's not obvious. It could be that something comes up where it makes it more viable to move ahead faster. What's here and more in line with 131. Depending on how quickly other states move. So I want to just take it out.
All right. So moving on, section 6 is a repeal of a couple of sections from Act 131. It's not that you're changing the substance, you're just incorporating those changes into this bill, H238, prospective definition of outdoor apparel and prospective definition of regulated PFAS. They're not going to be in another bill and in this bill or in separate bills. It's just all in H238. And similarly, in section 7, there's some conforming amendments to the Act 131 effective dates because you're incorporating those effective dates into H238. And then you get to the definition, the effective dates in section 8. This section and the reports you just talked about, the reports to the General Assembly take effect on July 1, 2025, even though they're not due until 2033. Section 1, the PFAS and consumer products takes effect on January 1, 2026, which was the effective date in Act 131, except that cleaning products, dental floss, and fluorine treated containers shall take effect on July 1, 2027. And that's to get it the 2 years that you gave those other products last year in 131. Same 2-year phase in of the prohibition. Cookware, House Committee took testimony. Steve request push up is the effective date for cookware to 2028, and they did that. And then section 1, NH 238 supersedes all of the provisions in Act 131 that would conflict with H 238. So you don't have potential conflict between the two acts. In section 2, the definition of regulated PFAS for textiles and textile articles, July 1, 2027. That's when it goes from 100 to 50. And the definition of outdoor apparel, July 1, 2028, when that outdoor apparel for wet weather conditions is listed as apparel, subject to the prohibition, July 1, 2028. And then the repeal of the Act 131 provisions and the amended Act 131 effective dates take effect on January 1, 2026, when the prohibition for those products will take effect. So that's the bill.
Okay, so we've got a couple of places where we've been talking language a little bit, and then broader concept at the end on how quickly do we move forward.
And I think you'll probably hear requests, or if you haven't for this already.
Yeah.
To change the effective dates.
we've heard.
Yeah, which one else, someone.
If anything, I'd move the effective dates closer to today. So we'll hear from people, but you know, I don't understand why the cookware is out so far. And I know we have testimony sitting on our webpage, and I'll go back and look at it again. We heard a little bit last Friday.
Was a request from the regulated industry, for, product lines, manufacturing pages, etc.
Okay, questions for my full committee? I have a lot here, so my suggestion is that we're gonna come back to this and make decisions. So I think it's important for us to go back through the testimony that we have, and you have additional testimony on the webpage today. So go back through and look at that, and then look again at Act 131. It is different from what the bill is, but it's important, I think, to understand the report that we got. And then we'll have Michael in again to make some definitive changes on the bill so we can vote it out sooner than later. And that's where we are. So we'll adjourn.